BBC's Tom Bateman. An explosion at the entrance of a military hospital in Kabul has killed 3 people, wounded at least 16. City residents reported hearing 2 explosions in the area of the hospital in Kabul's 10th district, along with the sound of gunfire. News and analysis at townhall.com.
You're listening to KTalk Radio, KBJA 1640 AM, in Salt Lake City and all across the Wasatch Front, bringing live local two-way coverage.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Flying numbskulls and broadcasting.
Joe Biden traveled to Europe last week, so you can only imagine how.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lowell Nelson here on KTalk Media. This morning on the path to state and local sovereignty, this is KTalk Media, KBJA 1640 AM, broadcasting from Independence Square in the heart of the Salt Lake Valley. I am your host, Lowell Nelson. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, in the year of our Lord 2021. Today, on the path to state sovereignty, a lawmaker in New Hampshire wants his state to secede from the Union because of Biden's heavy-handed vaccine mandate. And Ian Freeman joins me today on the path to state sovereignty. Ian lives in New Hampshire. Not only can he tell us about the secessionist movement there, but also about an early morning raid of his home office conducted by agents of the state. And of course, as usual, we invite your telephone calls, your questions and comments. But first, a vignette of life on the Boxan Ranch north of Salmon, Idaho, where I grew up. You know, last week I described a lesson from my dad about how seeking freebies undermines your character, or how important it is to earn what you receive or possess. Well, today, while we are talking about earning what we receive, I'm going to tell you how I earned $50 from my parents one year. I was just in grade school at the time. I overheard Mom and Dad telling an older brother, Gary, that they would give him $50 if he would go a whole year without eating any candy. Well, that was a lot of money to a youngster like me. I'm guessing I was about 10 years old at the time, so I asked my parents if they'd make me the same deal. Well, I think Mom was pleased with my interest, and it wasn't easy. I must admit that I liked candy bars, such as the Zero Bar or the Babe Ruth and Reese's peanut butter cups, right? But I was determined to get that $50. I went trick-or-treating at Halloween, of course, but I put the candy in the freezer for safekeeping. Same thing at Christmas time and at Easter time. I refused to eat any candy for an entire year. Folks, I earned that $50. At the end of the year, by the way, I pulled out of the freezer all the candy I'd stored there, probably several pounds of it, I'd guess. And I looked at it, and then I realized, you know what? I had no desire for it. In fact, it seemed somewhat repugnant to me, so I tossed it into the garbage. And ever since then, folks, I have been able to avoid cookies, candy, cakes, pies, refined sugars, refined starches, really anything that undermines one's health. In other words, refusing such things became easy for me. Now, those things might have been a stronger temptation for me had I not gone a year without them. And so I am ever so thankful to my parents for giving me that $50 deal. Not only did I earn the money, but I earned something even more valuable than the money. And that is the character or the habit, whatever you want to call it, to be able to refuse poor food choices, to refuse unhealthful foods. And that concludes today's sketch of life on the Boxan Ranch north of Salmon, Idaho. Well, just as avoiding bad foods helps us to avoid illness, avoiding unconstitutional actions helps the people of the states avoid tyranny and the loss of their liberty and prosperity. And adhering to the Constitution for the United States is important to our republic. However, it is just a piece of paper and will not enforce itself. We, the people, must do that. But to enforce it, we must understand it, which is why we discuss it on this show which airs every Tuesday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock. We archive the show on SoundCloud, and I link it to it on my Facebook page, Lowell Nelson, where you can share your insights, make suggestions, ask questions, find links to the articles we discuss. It is the purpose of this show to restore the sovereignty of the several states, or the people of the several states. And I believe we can best do that if we nullify any legislative act of Congress, any executive order of the President, any judicial opinion of a federal judge, and any bureaucratic regulation of the general government that exceeds the bounds of that sacred compact, the Constitution for the United States. Now, there is a lawmaker in New Hampshire who wants his state to secede from the Union because of Biden's heavy-handedness in imposing the vaccine mandate. Well, joining me now on the path to state sovereignty to discuss this and related topics is Ian Freeman of Keene, New Hampshire. Ian is the host of the nationally syndicated talk show Free Talk Live, the program director of LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, and is a libertarian activist who migrated to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. Ian has been arrested several times for peaceful civil disobedience. He executive produced the documentary Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. A peace minister in the Shire Free Church, he's also a sound money advocate. He's on the board of directors of UPMA, the United Precious Metals Association, which is where I met him because I'm also on that board, and he also co-founded Bitcoin Embassy, New Hampshire. Ian, welcome to the Path to State Sovereignty.
Lowell, good morning, and thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Whoops, I didn't push the right button there, Ian, so nobody heard your reply, but thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me now?
On the Path to State Sovereignty.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You bet. We got you loud and clear now,
cool.
my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Ian, when I first heard your story, and I went to your website also to see what happened to you, I was angry, I was upset, and I was also keen to invite you onto the radio with me. You know,
Thank you.
But the first segment of my show is always devoted to some aspect of state sovereignty. So we're going to save your story of your arrest for the next segment of our show, which is at 20 past the hour. But for right now, let's talk about state sovereignty. This idea of the New Hampshire legislator, seceding from the Union because of the COVID mandate, right? Tell us about that. A little bit about where that originated and what the current feeling in New Hampshire is about that.
Well, there's a couple of minor tweaks I'd like to make to this statement. It's not just one legislator here in New Hampshire. It's actually 9 of them who have co-sponsored this legislation. Now, to be fair, there are 400 state representatives in New Hampshire, so we actually have the largest representative body of all the 50 states and one of the largest in the Western world. So it's still, a small fraction of the 400, but honestly, you can't have more than 10 do a co-sponsor. So we had almost the maximum number of co-sponsors on this particular bill, which would essentially, if it passes, maybe I should say when it passes, that would essentially have New Hampshire declare its independence. It wouldn't be some sort of process of, oh, well, if this passes, then the State House will look at different options as to how to beginning to start considering, seceding, like some of these other things, like in Texas, where it would the thing they put together earlier this year would just have been like a referendum, a completely non-binding thing. This, if passed by over 2/3 of New Hampshire voters, would absolutely instantly declare independence from the United States. So it's a fairly, big proposal, and arguably it puts us ahead of California's movement and Texas's movement as far as, the political process and getting this thing moving. And it, for some people, it might have been the Biden mandate that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but a lot of people have been frustrated, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners and you have for a long time, by the federal government and its continued reach into our private lives, its continued destruction of innocent life all around the world, and just the general ruining of the freedom to conduct business and the freedom to live your life as you choose. So, this isn't just a one-issue, motivation here.
Yeah, so is it the case that the act that's in the legislature, the bill is in the legislature, if passed, then it would be like an initiative or a referendum that everybody, all voters in New Hampshire, would then vote to vote on, or if it's passed in the legislature, then it suddenly happens.
Okay, so New Hampshire doesn't have a referendum process like some states do. So the only way to get a question on the ballot for people to vote on is to actually put forward what's called a constitutional amendment, or a CACR. I think it stands for Constitutional Amendment Concurrent Resolution. And so the state representatives or the state senators have to actually do this. So it has to go through them first, which is going to be the first challenge for this, is to get over 60% of both the state House and the state Senate to vote to put this on the ballot. But the interesting thing about this is, while that seems like a difficult thing to achieve, because there's, obviously there's some people who are loyalists to the empire and they will not vote in favor of secession, but this question actually is whether or not whether or not they favor secession, but whether or not they're willing to let people vote on the question. And so it's a lot easier for a state representative who's maybe sitting on the fence or maybe is even against the idea of secession to still be pressured into voting for this by simply saying, well, wait a minute, you don't, whatever you think about secession, that's off the table. The question is, do you think the people should vote on this? And that allows you to put pressure on even the Democrats who, they love to talk about how they love democracy. Well, are you against democracy? Because if you're, against democracy, then you should vote to not allow people to vote on this. But if you want people to make their own decision for themselves, then they should be able to vote. So if over 60% of the state House and the state Senate votes to just simply put this question on the ballot, then it will go on the 2022 election ballot, which is the full state election. Here in New Hampshire, we elect the entire state government basically every 2 years. And so then, do you want me to read the text? It's one sentence, or two sentences, really, really simple.
Sure.
So
yeah, go ahead.
It'll update the New Hampshire Constitution, Article 7, to say this. It'll add this to the Constitution. Independent nation. New Hampshire declares itself as independent from the United States and peaceably, immediately proceeds as a sovereign nation. All other references to the United States in this Constitution and state statutes and regulations are nullified. And that's it. It's real simple. And then at that point, it would require over 2/3 of the voters to then vote for this, and it would immediately go into the New Hampshire Constitution. There wouldn't be any, fighting over anything else about details. We can figure those out later. We declare independence first and then figure out, treaties and agreements and negotiations with the foreign U.S. government at that point.
Now, one of the big things that that most states are burdened with is the flow of money from the general government to the states. Here in Utah, for example, roughly 1/3 of our budget, of our state budget, comes from the general government. I mean, that's probably taxes that Utahns paid to the IRS that are coming back to the state. But it's almost political suicide for, at least in the minds of most legislators, it would be political suicide to, break away from that revenue stream and reject basically the money from the feds. So how would that be addressed in New Hampshire? How much of New Hampshire's budget comes from the feds, and how are you overcoming that objection?
Well, New Hampshire is what's called a donor state, which means that as you sort of suggested there, taxpayers paying to the IRS actually give more money to the IRS in New Hampshire than the federal government gives back to the state government. So, by leaving the United States, that New Hampshire would then have more financial autonomy, and the people of New Hampshire would certainly be wealthier as a result of that. I certainly don't want to see New Hampshire's taxes increase at all. And to be fair, New Hampshire has actually done a pretty good job of saying no to certain handouts from the federal government, and the two that come to mind quickly are the seatbelt laws. Here in New Hampshire, there is no adult seatbelt law. If you're over the age of 16, you're driving as a passenger or a driver in a car, you don't have to wear a seatbelt. They can't pull you over for it. They can't ticket you for it. And the reason why that's the case is because New Hampshire has consistently, over decades, refused the federal government's handout. I think they offer a couple $1,000,000 or something like that for people, in that state, for the state government to pass a seatbelt law, and New Hampshire won't do it. So we've turned that down. And then most recently, just a few weeks ago, the Executive Council, which is New Hampshire kind of, I don't know if any other state has this, it's a seat of 5 people that work with the governor, and they control the purse strings of any spending of over $10,000 or any receiving of over $10,000. So the federal government wanted to give the state of New Hampshire $27 million for COVID, essentially bribe money to get out there and pimp the vaccine to the people. And a bunch of protesters showed up at the Executive Council meeting. There were 9 arrests for peaceful protesters just basically sitting there. It was pretty crazy. But the people who were on this Executive Council voted 4-1 to reject the $27 million, which makes New Hampshire, at least so far, the only state of all the 50 states to turn down any COVID bribe money from the federal government. So New Hampshire has a history of saying no and nullifying some of these federal handouts, and this would just be the ultimate nullification.
Stay right there, Ian. We have a commercial break. Be right back, folks, with Ian Freeman of New Hampshire.
He learned to pitch in your backyard. Now his team's coming over to celebrate their high school championship. So you need to patch those bare spots fast. Pennington One Step Complete has a revolutionary formula that repairs bare spots in only 2 weeks or less. Pennington's been trusted since 1945, and now it works even faster. One Step Complete from Pennington. Honest green. Get your lawn ready for any occasion. Head to your local retailer to pick up One Step Complete.
It's the little things, like getting flowers for no reason at all. Aw, love you too, Boo. Or feeling the love from your favorite store. At Bell's, customers get all sorts of perks, like Sal Circle Rewards, which give cardholders double points every day on every purchase. Or Club 40 and Fabulous, where everyone 40 and up gets an extra 20% off on Tuesdays, even on our best spot-on values. Fresh styles, big savings, and fun perks every day. Bell's, little things mean everything. Bell's is part of our Stage family. Offer exclusions apply.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Path to State Sovereignty on KTalk Media, AM 1640. I am your host, Lowell Nelson. Our guest this hour is Ian Freeman, host of the nationally syndicated talk show Free Talk Live. And we've just been discussing in the first segment of our show the state of state sovereignty in the state of New Hampshire. And Ian, it's awesome to have you with us today. I count this a great opportunity to get better acquainted with you and your situation there. My comment about your legislature is that, boy, it takes a lot of guts, it takes courage to turn down money from the general government when they're holding it out for you, wanting you to take it. And so I commend your legislators for having the courage to do so.
Well, New Hampshire is one of the original free places, and it is arguably the most free of all the 50 states, which, of course, is one of the reasons why it was chosen as the destination for a very libertarian migration project. And a lot of the people in Utah can understand this. The Mormons, of course, made a specific concerted effort to gather together in the state of Utah, and it has made a difference. I mean, anybody that whether you visited Utah or not, that the Mormon influence there is very, very strong, and so it's proven. It's a proven tactic to bring like-minded people together in the same geographic area. And New Hampshire attracted a group of libertarians called the Free State Project. Back in 2003 was when the Free State Project chose which state out of several different states. There were 10 different options. New Hampshire overwhelmingly won that vote. And the founder of the Free State Project had done research on these migratory movements of like-minded people, like the Mormons to Utah, like the hippies moving into Vermont, which turned a red state to a blue state, basically. So, it's definitely something that works. And so we took an already free place, relatively at least free, because we don't have true freedom in the United States, but New Hampshire was pretty free, And we figured it would be a good starting point to make it more free, and that's why thousands of freedom-loving people have migrated here. And the state legislator who put forward this initiative to the constitutional amendment to declare independence, he's a free stater, and he's actually a 5-term state rep. Here, a lot of the free staters, the people who moved here, run for office not as libertarians on the ballot, even though they are truly libertarians in their hearts. They're running as Republicans. Sometimes they run as Democrats, but mostly as Republicans. So we've had a lot of political success. We've had more people elected here, more liberty-loving people, like principled libertarian, voluntarist types, good sound money lovers, independence lovers, elected here than the Libertarian Party has had elected nationally in 50 years. We've done more in a decade than they have in 50 years, and that's because of concentration, because it works. So whether or not we're going to see the ballot measure pass the State House or the State Senate, that remains to be seen, but I think this is going to be a very big issue. I don't think, just so you know, one of the neat things about New Hampshire is that every bill, all 800-something bills that have been submitted by the State House members and the State Senate, every single bill in New Hampshire gets a public hearing. There's not some kind of political wrangling process where you've got to know the right people and be in the right halls of power in order to get your bill heard. Every single bill goes to a public hearing, which means that anyone who wants to, whether they're in favor of independence or they're in favor of staying with the empire, they will have the chance to come speak and be heard by a State House committee on this issue. And I'm expecting that hearing to be very well attended. And the more people that can attend that hearing, the more those state representatives that are sitting there watching will get the clue that they better take it seriously, because there's going to be a lot of people that care about independence, I think.
You'd be interested to know that we set a record here in Utah a couple of weeks ago. There was a legislative interim committee that held a public hearing on the vaccine mandate, and through a little bit of organization and mobilization of people, we had approximately 1,000 people attend that committee hearing.
Wow!
And basically set a new record. I mean, we filled the room, and then there were I think 3 or 5 other overflow rooms that were filled up,
wow.
With people.
Yeah.
That hearing went 3.5 hours. I mean, kudos to the legislators who allowed it to go that long. 3.5 hours of testimony. Everybody who wanted to testify could, and I think there were 8 people or something that were in favor of the mandate, and about 99% of those who testified were opposed to it.
That's great.
So that is the kind of attendance that you need at the committee meetings to really make a statement. So Ian, off-air caller asked she asked if you knew just in rough terms, how much bribe money New Hampshire has taken from the general government, and how much bribe money Utah has taken from the general government.
I don't have
on an annual basis.
Yeah, I don't have those statistics. Whatever the amount is, it's too much. Obviously, the more the local governments take from the federal governments, the more beholden that they feel to them. And it's like welfare, right? It's welfare for states instead of individuals, and it behaves in a similar manner. So whatever it is, I'm against it. I mean, I think the federal government is just truly an evil organization. I tend to think governments in general are evil, but the federal government is more so than any other. And so the best thing we can do in an abusive relationship is to break up and to divorce DC.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that. And here in Utah, I know that roughly a third of our budget comes from the general government. So I'm sure most of that is bribe money. We have another caller wants to make a comment or ask a question. So let's go to caller line 5. You're on the air here on the Path to State Sovereignty with our guest, Ian Freeman.
Yes. Good morning, guys. Isn't Bernie Sanders from New Hampshire? It seems to me you have quite a contrasting political associations up there, don't you?
Bernie Sanders is actually from Vermont, and I understand that it's a lot of people don't even know where New Hampshire is located. So I understand there's some confusion out there. But Vermont tends to be a much more left-leaning state than New Hampshire. New Hampshire is sort of this I don't know how you would want to describe it. Like, people like to say purple because it's not really red, it's not really blue. It can go both ways. So, for instance, in the 2020 election, and this isn't unusual, by the way, for New Hampshire voters voted just barely for Joe Biden nationally, but then they voted for a Republican governor and voted Republicans into the state house. So, New Hampshire voters are very, very independent. And in New Hampshire, actually, there's three different potential classes of voter registration. There's Republican, Democrat, and undeclared. And interesting thing in New Hampshire is undeclared voters are actually the plurality of New Hampshire voters. So anytime there's an election, you better be worried about what those undeclared voters are going to do, because they're going to make the difference as to whether or not you get elected. It's not the Republicans or the Democrats who decide elections in New Hampshire. It's the undeclareds, and they all consider themselves very independent, although there was a recent study that showed, this was just from a couple weeks ago, the local college in New Hampshire did a scientific phone survey of over 1,000 or 1,300 New Hampshire voters and found that 95% of New Hampshire Republicans think the country's on the wrong track, and about 73%, I think, or 75% of the undeclared voters also think the country is on the wrong track. Now, that's not specifically a question about secession, but it does show that I think the time is ripe to be talking with New Hampshire folks about this issue.
Well, thank you, Bob. Excellent question, excellent point.
I just wanted to thank him and say that their firearm laws have been essentially gone to most of the so-called red states. But we do appreciate your people that believe in the Constitution.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely, Bob. Thank you for your call. Now, Ian, I want to get to the story that is, the thing that made me angry, but because it's a story, I think we need to build awareness among ourselves and our audiences of the tyranny of our current government. Mm-hmm. We need to realize how precarious our freedom is, and if we hope to preserve it, then we really need to understand what went on. So can you take us back earlier this year when you were minding your own business and agents of the state came and busted into your place? Talk to us about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, boy, it was upsetting to me as well at 6 a.m. to be awakened to the sound of smashing glass coming from the first story of my two-story home here in New Hampshire. I live in a duplex that is owned by the Shire Free Church, and it's essentially a parsonage. It's also where the studio for Free Talk Live, my radio show, is located. And so I heard a window being busted in, and I thought, oh man, some kid threw a brick or something through the window, and I put my robe on, and my girlfriend and the dog, we all come out of the bedroom, and that's when I realized, and I looked downstairs, and that's when I realized that, this isn't. And there was another smashing sound as we were putting the robe on. But that's when I realized, okay, this isn't just some kids outside screwing around. This is there's a gang of armed men surrounding the house, shouting orders to come downstairs with your hands up. Come on downstairs into this area right by your front door where we've just smashed the window in and there's glass all over the floor. Yeah, just come right on downstairs in your bare feet here, and then you can put your shoes on, which have broken glass in them, and we're going to, have you come outside. Oh, yeah, and, put the dog down. And so I managed to convince them to allow me to continue, carrying the dog, so I didn't have to put the dog down on broken glass. We managed to dump out the glass from our shoes mostly and shuffle outside, where they then ordered me to put the dog down. And I said, are you going to, take the dog and put it somewhere safe? And they just didn't care. They just let the dog roam around in the streets at 6 a.m. Thank goodness no one hit it with a car. But just, typical kind of callous behavior by these people. By the way, they flew a drone into my house, so there was this loud whirring noise as this drone was floating there, and they did that because, they're scared. They think you're going to shoot them or something, so they want their drone to make sure it's safe before they come in. And so it was pretty terrifying. At the same time, they again, it's a duplex. Some of my friends and another minister was living on the other side of the house, and they took a battering ram and attached it to a tank, an armored truck called the Bearcat, and rammed that right into his front door and busted that open, as well as busted in a window there. They tore out some cables from some of my broadcast stacks here in the studio completely unnecessarily, disconnected the internet connections, stole the security camera system that we had, and then proceeded to go through the entire house and take every single piece of gold that I had and silver, all the gold backs that I had here. We had just gotten the beautiful New Hampshire gold back, which I'm sure you've spoken to your listeners about a number of times. I'm a huge fan of the gold back. They took my entire inventory of thousands of gold backs. They took a bunch of U.S. dollars that I had here as well. They stole some physical bitcoins, and which are kind of like a collector's item. So they stole hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of dollars worth of things here from this house, and then they proceeded to arrest me and 5 of my friends on various different victimless so-called crimes, financial so-called crimes, including unlicensed money transmission, conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitter. I caught what they call the kingpin charge, which I face a minimum of 10-year sentence if found guilty of this charge, and it basically is, what is the name of this one? It is continuing financial crimes enterprise. There's a money laundering charge for me, and there's a bunch of what they call wire fraud charges, all in relation to the online distribution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
Wow. So is there any basis for these charges? Are they simply fraudulent? What do they hope to achieve, do you think? You haven't gone to trial yet then, apparently?
No, the trial this is federal court, so the system moves very, very slowly. The trial is set at the earliest for May of next year, and I don't know if we're going to even have it then. It may end up being delayed even further. At this point, I don't think we've even seen all of the discovery from the prosecution on this. I personally, think that these charges are nonsense, but I haven't even seen the discovery yet that they have, so I don't even really know what their case is. Quote-unquote wire fraud sounds real bad. It sounds like we took advantage of somebody or whatever, but that's not what they're alleging at all. They're alleging that wire fraud is essentially telling a lie to a bank, and so they're alleging that we lied to a bank at some point on more than one occasion. And I don't agree that is the case. I certainly don't agree with the money laundering charge, which is completely ridiculous. In that case, they sent an undercover agent who I refused to sell Bitcoin to when he told me he was a heroin dealer. I told him, nope, can't sell you any Bitcoin because, I know what that means. I know that's a setup for a money laundering charge. And so he went to one of the Bitcoin vending machines that my church operated here in New Hampshire, and he went ahead and bought Bitcoin from a vending machine, and they say that was money laundering. So I don't know what they expected me to do. I don't know if they thought I was supposed to stand by the vending machines and tackle the man if he came into the business. So I think that one's pretty much BS. And then money transmission is sort of a legal term that essentially, if you were to go to Western Union and tell Western Union that you wanted to send me $100, they would charge you $5 or $10 or whatever, and then they would, they would make that money available for me to pick up here in Keene. That would make Western Union a money transmitter. But in the case of somebody buying a Bitcoin from a Bitcoin vending machine or buying it directly from you, either online or in person, or a gold back or an ounce of gold, that's just a direct trade. That's not a money transmission. There's no third party that is getting involved there. So I think they're going to have a real tough time arguing some of these allegations if this even does end up going to trial eventually. But, none of that, even if they drop all the charges tomorrow, none of that makes what they did okay. Coming in at 6 in the morning, destroying somebody's home and, tearing up their studio. It's going to be almost impossible to get any kind of compensation for that, even if they are, drop the charges later on. So this is just pure intimidation. This is pure tyranny. And the reason why they're doing this, Lowell, is because they want to send a message to people that love alternative currencies like gold, silver, and especially cryptocurrency. They want to send a message saying that you better, obey. You better ask permission before you do anything outside of the U.S. dollar, because they don't want people getting out of the U.S. dollar. That's ultimately what this is. Now, the federal, the FBI isn't going to admit to that, but that's ultimately what drives these sorts of moves by the federal government. They know that people can get out of the dollar now easier than they ever could, and things like Bitcoin allow people to get out and protect their wealth, because Bitcoin tends to go up in price over time as the U.S. dollar is going down in value, and we all know that the dollar is not going to go up in value. It's going to keep going down as they print more out, and they print more, and now they've got trillions more that they've been printing out, and they want to keep people in the dollar because they want to keep stealing your wealth from you, and they hate things like gold and silver, and they hate Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and they will be violent if they need to be to enforce their monopoly.
Well, and that brings us up a question that another caller asked me to ask you, and then we'll get back to your story because I am interested in pursuing that just a little bit. But the question is, if New Hampshire votes to declare its independence from the other states, what currency will you use there in New Hampshire, and how will New Hampshire citizens transact, do economic transactions with residents of the neighboring states?
That's a great question, and I do love talking about independence even more so than the terrible federal government attack on my house. It's definitely a favorite topic of mine. I will say that New Hampshire currently has about 40, I think maybe a little bit more than 40 state representatives, so about a tenth of our state legislature are pretty libertarian guys and gals who are Free State Project early movers, people who made the move up here for the Free State Project. And so we've got a good chunk of the state legislature, and there's probably another 50 or so that like to vote for pro-liberty matters. So we've got 40 to 100 state reps that are pretty libertarian minded, and they understand sound money and real money and things like that. So I would hope that if New Hampshire, or maybe I should say when New Hampshire votes for independence, that New Hampshire will not be foolish enough to implement its own state currency. I think that would be a terrible idea. We don't need more central banks in the world. We don't need another fiat currency, a government-issued currency for them to inflate and go insane with. So what I'd like to see, ideally, would be for the market to decide. There doesn't need to be any legal tender. If people want to keep using the dollar, then let them. If people want to use gold and silver or gold backs, great. If people want to use cryptocurrency, fantastic. I don't think there needs to be a centrally decided one-size-fits-all currency. Let's let the market decide.
Yeah, I'm all for that as well, Ian. And I just realized I blew right through the 9:40 commercial break. Beg your pardon, but we'll continue straight on. Another off-air caller wanted clarification on who were the agents that broke into your place. Was it? I read somewhere it was like the FBI, and was it the FBI working with local police, or was it state police? Just who was it?
Yeah, it was a big collection of goons, mostly the FBI. There were dozens of agents just at my house alone, and again, they raided several different locations simultaneously, so this was a huge operation that morning. But FBI agents, ATF, Postal Service, IRS, Treasury, local police, and there's probably one or two that I'm leaving out. But yeah, there was a huge group of bureaucrats pawing through our property here.
Wow, it reminds me of that placard on Ron Paul's desk. It says, "Don't steal, the government hates competition." Because you are actually just simply engaging in economic transactions, and the government doesn't want anybody infringing on their turf. They don't want people, competing. They don't want competing currencies, but that's going to be the thing that frees us. And now, the Bitcoin is cool, and yet I thought that because the general government wants to go to a digital currency, they would probably allow Bitcoin to flourish for a time before they made, the digital dollar, by fiat, make it the way we pay our bills in this country at some point. Do you have any speculation about that?
Yeah, they are definitely talking about a digital dollar, or what is technically termed a CBDC, or a central bank digital currency. And, of course, there's a lot of confusion out there in the mainstream media where they'll say things like, oh, it's a federal government's own cryptocurrency, which is not true at all. A federal digital currency is just a completely centrally controlled, central bank issued, central bank manipulated version of the dollar that just gives them even more control and even more power to freeze accounts and to get into your business and to know what you're buying. And it's a terrible idea, which is, of course, why they are excited about it and looking into it. I don't think that in a country which at least still pays lip service to freedom of speech, it's not truly freedom of speech, as we know if we're on the radio, but it pays lip service to it. So I think that they couldn't possibly get away with a ban on cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. I don't think they're going to get away with that, because ultimately that would be them saying that programming is now illegal, and that's ultimately what Bitcoin is. It's just an open source program that Satoshi Nakamoto created in 2008 and 2009. It's actually it was just 13 years ago on Halloween that Satoshi released the Bitcoin white paper. So this has barely been with us for over a decade and a third at this point. But I don't think they can ban it, and I think that frustrates them because they really want to. So what they do is they target the centralized hubs. They target the things that they're used to. They're used to targeting the people in in business, for instance. So they'll target the Bitcoin exchanges and try to regulate them to death. That's their goal. They want everybody to be under their thumb as much as possible and to control the flows in and out of cryptocurrencies, try to identify who's using it and at what level, and try to tax them on it. But I don't think we're going to see a ban on it ultimately, and so I'm a little optimistic in that way.
Now, some states have legalized gold and silver specie. I know that Utah did. I think Colorado already was that way. Has New Hampshire done that as well?
I know what you're referring to, but I mean, I don't know for sure if there's been a bill like Utah's, in that it's not legal tender per se. You can't pay your taxes with gold or silver in New Hampshire, but it's not illegal either. I mean, you can certainly accept, and we do have businesses here accepting goldbacks, for instance, in payment, because, well, they're beautiful, and who wouldn't want to accept a goldback? But yeah, you don't need to ask government permission to accept Bitcoin or to accept goldbacks or gold or silver. So by default legal. It's just not legal tender here, and I don't know if there are any proposals at this time to do that.
Yes. Well, back to your case. Are you defending yourself, or have you hired an attorney to help you?
Yeah, I like to defend myself on the different civil disobedience, peaceful arrests that I've had in my past. I've always done my own defense, but I don't know anything about federal court, and these are pretty serious felony charges where I'm looking at a lot of time in prison. So I did hire defense attorney Mark Sisti here. He's well known and a very, very good attorney, and my other co-defendants are also. They also have defense attorneys as well. So, we're not taking a guilty plea, and we're going forward with this thing because we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't hurt anybody. There's no victim to these so-called crimes, and this is, it's a straight-up case of intimidation, and it's not the first time they've done this. They've targeted other Bitcoin sellers online in the past with very similar tactics. I don't know if they've actually raided those people, but by the way, if your listeners do want to see a just horrifying video, they can go to, regarding the raid, like footage of the people outside of my home, you can go to thecrypto6.com, and somebody put up a nice website about us, and they put together a video because we've got good group of activists here in New Hampshire, and some of my friends here in the Keene area, they caught wind of the raid as it was happening, and so they actually came out with video cameras and got some footage of it. And the police didn't like that. They they threatened them and pushed them down the block, like all the way a block away from the house, just to prevent them from trying to get video of this. Pretty outrageous behavior, very unconstitutional, very rude, very unprofessional behavior on the part of these cops.
Yeah, that was one of the videos I watched, by the way. Thecrypto6.com is the website, TheCryptosix.com. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it have been great if one of your neighbors there had been the one filming from their own property, for example, right across from your house there? That would have been way cool. So it pays to have good neighbors, folks.
Sure does.
It pays to know your neighbor and to have them on your side ideologically. Well, certainly on the side of freedom. That would have been very helpful. But it was absolutely wrong, morally wrong of the government to do to you what they did. And I hope that comes out. I hope that if it goes to trial, that it is a jury trial.
Yeah.
And that you'll have a jury of your peers that will, understand that these charges are nonsense. And we'll the good one other good news thing I can think of, Ian, is that you're not sitting in prison right now. Like if you were part of the January 6th so-called insurrection, which is really just a peaceful rally.
Yeah.
Some of those people
the unauthorized
tour
of the Capitol. I did sit in jail though for 69 days prior to being given bail, and they're very, very restricted bail conditions. So I'm currently on what's called home confinement, and I have an ankle monitor on me because, well, they put me on some very restrictive conditions. I'm not allowed to speak with my co-defendants. There's a list of other people who are potential witnesses, all of whom are friends of mine. The claim is, oh, you're going to intimidate these witnesses, and it's like, no, these are my friends. I'd really like to be able to talk to them, but nope, can't speak with them. There's just this lengthy thing. I can't do anything with cryptocurrency. I can't use Bitcoin. I can't accept Bitcoin. I can't spend cryptocurrency. I can't do anything with that. And very, very restrictive. Another friend of mine, one of my co-defendants, his name is actually, legally he changed it to Nobody when he ran for governor a couple of years ago, which is kind of fun, right? Nobody for governor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun jokes you can make with that name like that. But he got raided and he got arrested. They held him in jail for 6 months prior to finally releasing him. Now, he's able to leave his house without asking permission, which I have to ask permission. But he can't speak publicly. They took away his freedom of speech. They told him, you're not allowed to be interviewed by television. You're not allowed to be interviewed on the radio. So, there's some things I can do that he can't do, and there's things that he can do that I can't do. None of these bail restrictions are consistent. They're certainly not constitutional, but here we are. That's the way things are.
Wow, that is infuriating. Folks, we are listening to Ian Freeman of Keene, in New Hampshire. That's the name of your town, right? Keene?
Yeah, Keene. It's a little city in the, they call it a city, but it's a big town in the southwest corner of New Hampshire.
Cool. We invite your calls, your comments, your questions. You can join the conversation here on KTalk Media by dialing 801-254-1640. That's 801-254-1640. If you have a question for Ian or a comment or an observation to make, we certainly will be happy to take your call. We've got about 6 minutes left in the hour, Ian. The time has flown by.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed getting to know you better. Going back to one of the questions, you said you love to talk about state sovereignty, and I do too.
Yeah, it's great. I'm glad you have this show.
Well, we're trying to promote the idea here in Utah because it just boggles my mind that line 5 is going to call in. Is calling in. Let me just put you on hold for a moment, line 5, for me to make this comment. It just boggles my mind that here in Utah, people think that the Attorney General filing a lawsuit against the federal government in opposition to the mandate is an actual solution. I just don't understand that, because the states are parties to the contract, right? They're the ones who form the general government. The general government is subordinate to the states, the parties to the compact. And so what do we expect if we go to a federal court and ask them to declare the mandate unconstitutional? And what are they going to say? Well, if they're siding with their own government, they're going to say, yeah, it's constitutional. We don't care. And then what are we left to do with as a state? Well, we have to acquiesce. So, I think this real solution is simply to nullify the mandate. What's your solution? And then we'll get to this question.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you can't ask a federal court that's run and staffed by federal agents to decide against the power of the federal government. And you're right; the power is the individual. The power is collected within the 50 states. So the more decentralized we can go with freedom, the better we can. The more free we will be. And nullification is the solution there for sure.
Okay, excellent. Let's go to line 5. Your question, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Dean. I'm very familiar with federal marshals coming forward. And there's nobody's held responsible. I don't know if I told you a little bit about my story with my son on this white supremacist roundup by the John Huber here in Utah. So this was in October 2026. About 15 of them come swatting in at our place of work where we live and hauled him off with no warrant. I happened to be there, demanded a warrant. They had no idea what he's being arrested for. Found out that he was arrested for supposedly drug distribution. Facing 40 years, and of course, no discovery. They appointed him attorney. They actually appointed a fairly good attorney, which they worked for the government and for the court. And so, after a bunch of months, and he got put on probation and all this pretrial confinement deal, had to go through all these hoops. Luckily, they let him out because of the paperwork that I filed. But you'll never get any recourse. His name's still in the papers. They finally dismissed the charges.
Wow.
All it was somebody used the old phone number. Knows a little bit about some of my cases, and I'm going to court next week on this other deal. And I've been able to get some dismissed with prejudice. The last one, the Lowell Watch. I spent 10 months in jail for a trespass, and a still trespass from a city over here in American Fork, Utah. And I'm not allowed to go into the city or any place.
Yeah, Dean has quite a story there, Ian. And
there's no shortage of these stories. I mean, these things are so common of people just having their rights trampled on by the federal government and state governments as well. And it's just so frustrating. And that's one of the reasons why we have to end the relationship with these abusers and walk away. I mean, look, the country, the United States, is a failed concept. It did not work. It did not limit the size and the strength and the power of the federal government. As Lysander Spooner put it, either the Constitution has authorized the tyranny that we face, or it has been powerless to prevent it. Either way, it should not stand. And it's time to walk away and say goodbye and have 50 different national governments, which is what the United States originally was sort of intended to be. And New Hampshire said goodbye from the king back, a couple hundred years ago, and it can do it again. And so can Utah, and so can everybody else. So let's start this conversation and keep it going.
Excellent. Appreciate the comment, Dean. Let's go quickly to last caller, line 3. Whoops. That was a double clutch. Call right back in. I'll get you on. When I pushed the button, it double clicked, and so it hung you up. And that's my bad. Well, yeah, equipment a problem there, and I apologize for that. But if you'll call right back, I'll get you on. There you are, line 5. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I lost you there. What does it say in the Constitution about coinage and commerce? Who is in charge of that? Is it the federal government?
I believe
Ian,
the
you wanna
U.S.
say-
Constitution says they can coin money, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Coin money. What does that mean?
Well, it's a darn good question. Personally, I think they should stay out of anything regarding money because they're always going to be tempted to debase. They're always going to be tempted to steal and take advantage and inflate. And these people can't be trusted with any responsibilities.
And in my view, Scott, just let me throw in there that to coin money implies that money is coinage, meaning gold and silver. It's a hard metal. And doesn't leave any room for paper. I believe that statement in the Constitution to coin money shuts the door on fiat paper currency.
So that means to print coinage backed by silver and gold.
Yep. Well, not necessarily backed. I'm talking about the real silver and gold. The general government is empowered by the states to coin money, right?
Yeah,
and,
so that makes so that's like prior when we had the coins made out of silver.
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Constitution is something we need to keep fighting for, and as hard as we've got to go, we'll probably never get it done, but we're just gonna have to keep doing it. And I think that's a prime example of how it should be.
Yeah. Well,
have coins.
Absolutely. Scott, we're flat out of time, boy, and I appreciate your calls, your questions, and comments. Ian Freeman has been our guest here on the Path to State Sovereignty. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. We are just flat out of time.
Thanks, Lowell. I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Bye now.
Bye now.